perpetuation is not an event, it's a process. And
100%. Yes.
dude, it could be a 10 to 15 to 20 year process.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I am in sunny Hilton Head for the entire week, which I know is like a complete and total anomaly these days.
Revolutionary. No trips to the airport this week?
I know. I have no idea what to do with myself. So it's been pretty awesome. Well, I'm super excited that we have our very good friend, Jared Roy, with us from Keystone Agency Partners. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Carey.
Yeah.
It's good to meet you.
Talking about traveling, Jared, you and I were actually in the same circle for a while where we basically saw each other in every state but the states we're from, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm in Ohio as well today, which is home. But yeah, we've been having a great time kind of meeting up at a few of the events that we've attended together.
The last one, the most exciting. I mean, we got to experience an ice storm in Austin. Who the heck can say that, right?
That was a first for me. I know that Texas has had some ice recently. I've got some friends that live there, but I had not experienced it firsthand. I was happy to get home on time. And, it's interesting. I was in Michigan last week, and I got some ice coming out of Michigan as well.
Oh, my goodness. That's crazy.
Fortunately got home okay. So we're good.
Well, Jared, it's good to meet you. We haven't met before, so I'm super excited to get to know you a little bit better today. Would you start by just telling us a little bit about your background and the different roles you've had in the industry?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that, Lindsay. It's great to meet you as well. I've heard so much about you, and even have gotten to know you a little bit by listening to a couple of your episodes so far.
Yeah.
So great job. I'm excited to see what you're doing with your mom here. And of course, I've known Carey for a really long time. Although my entry into the insurance space is a little bit different than most, although I think everybody has their own unique story, right?
100%.
I kind of happened into the industry by accident. I didn't have family in the industry or anything. It didn't come from an agency where, there was kind of an easy way to step in. My dad was a pastor, actually. So, it wasn't in the cards for me to follow in his footsteps. But interestingly enough, I have a degree in sports medicine, and I always wanted to be a doctor and kind of ended up in that field. And then a few years into my degree, I decided I didn't want to be an athletic trainer. And so picked up a minor in sales and marketing, and kind of ended up down that road. And I think anyone who spends any time with me knows that sales is definitely the right spot for me. So I picked the right path. So out of college, I just kind of went into kind of a B2B sales type role. I was in medical device sales for 10 years. And then I found myself in 2009, right in the middle of the Great Recession, displaced, and as chance would have it, I found Marshberry, and Marshberry found me at the right time in my career, and at a time in their evolution of their business where they needed people to kind of be in a pure business development role. So I joined Marshberry in 2009. Back then I would say that there were a couple of us that were kind of in this role. We were evangelizing the gospel of Marshberry, just telling the story and really just getting to know insurance agency owners all over the country, understanding what they were trying to accomplish. And so my goal in that role, and I was in that role for a few years. And then while I was there at Marshberry, kind of transitioned to working on the network side, where they've got a whole series of networks where they help each other, agencies help each other grow and improve, kind of led growth and development for that segment of the business. And then for the last 5 or 6 years of my career there, I worked directly with agency owners, trying to help them just figure out where they wanted to go and how they were going to get there. And so there were, when I got to know these agency owners, which, as you know, Carey, they're a very unique breed of individual, right? Lots of great people, and they vary just like you and I do. But sometimes they don't know where they're going or how they're going to get there. But, I would always try to find out, where are they today? Where are they going? How are they going to get there? And kind of what issues and roadblocks are standing in their way? And that allowed me to kind of, obviously I was in a sales and business development role trying to build relationships, but it allowed me to kind of take a step back and really understand who they were and what they were trying to accomplish. So you kind of asked about the different roles that I played in insurance. I was always really just kind of trying to help the independent agency owner improve their business in some way. And that kind of consultative approach, I think, led me to be in a position where I met a lot of great people, and I'm obviously with Keystone Agency Partners now. And I met the folks who are on my team here. A couple of my team members I met while I was at Marshberry, and we got to know each other, and it just so happened that they were looking for somebody that could help take their story to the market, so to speak, and kind of growing their business. And here I am. So it really has. It's been a great role for me to step into. I'll also say, I wasn't necessarily looking to leave Marshberry. It was one of those once in a lifetime type opportunities to step into a growing company and really kind of make this whole business development team my own that I work with.
Hey guys, if you're looking to improve your bottom line, allow your team to operate efficiently, and really improve that customer retention, I believe you should check out Ascend. Ascend is the all-in-one insurance payment solution. They are focused on streamlining your invoicing, premium financing, accounting, and they'll even make your carrier payables for you. They are taking agency bill and making it as easy as direct bill. That is a game changer. They integrate with all of the major AMS players, and here's the best part. It's free. There is no subscription, no cost to you. They allow your customers to pay how they want. If you are interested in improving your efficiency, go visit ascend.com/Insurance Refocused and let them know that we sent you.
Well, it's funny that you say once in a lifetime opportunity, because I have unannounced currently, but will be by the time this episode is released. I'm actually taking an opportunity that is the same myself. I'll be joining a network, Indium.
Okay.
So, and that leads me directly into what I wanted to talk about next. What is the difference between Keystone and Keystone Agency Partners? Because Keystone is a network, as I understand it. So tell me a little bit about what the difference is between the two.
That's right. And that's a great question. And honestly, one that I get probably almost every conversation I have with anyone in the industry who's kind of trying to understand who we are and what we do. First of all, congratulations on your move. That's going to be super exciting.
I'm excited.
I can't wait to hear more about that. But just to kind of give you that differentiation, anytime I'm telling the KAP story, Keystone Agency Partners, we kind of go by KAP. So you'll hear me reference that. The KAP story really starts with Keystone. And if you've been in the industry for any amount of time, Keystone is a somewhat familiar name. They have quite a good, I think, brand reputation. But as you said, they are an aggregator. They're the number 4 agency partnership in the country right now, with about 300 agency partners in 20 states across the country. They do something like $5 billion of premium, of top line premium. And so obviously, they've been around a long time, about 40 years. And the genesis of the Keystone Network was really the CEO, David Bodker, was hired on by about a half a dozen agencies that just got together and said, hey, let's figure out how we can all do better business together. And it was essentially his job to try to help them do better business. And so get better contracts with carriers, leverage their buying power, bring them tools and resources to help them access different niches and markets and things like that. And so, like I said, as of today, Keystone's about 40 years old, and they're growing as well. And so where KAP kind of comes into that story is about 4 years ago, 2018, 2019, like other networks and aggregators, and really the whole industry, Keystone found themselves in a place where over the previous 5 years, they had lost about 27 members to consolidation. And what I mean by that is buyers had come in and bought those Keystone agencies, and because of that M&A, they had to leave Keystone, right? And you'll learn this, Lindsay. Growth is the lifeblood of any organization.
Amen.
But particularly networks, right? Because all of the power that Keystone and the other networks out there have to leverage is the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. So Keystone really wanted to figure out a way to not lose the culture that they've created. And so one thing that's really kind of key to this whole symbiotic partnership is Keystone has built into their franchise agreement a right of first refusal. And what that means is if any Keystone agency gets an offer from an outside buyer, or they, are considering selling the agency, Keystone has the right to match that offer so that agency doesn't have to sell outside Keystone. Well, before 2019, the Keystone network on the aggregator side didn't really have the means or the capacity or even the tools to execute bringing on those agencies. And so what happened was there was an agency in Ohio in 2019 that got an offer from an outside buyer, and they brought it to Keystone, and the Keystone leadership team said, listen, we're going to match your offer. You don't have to sell to, this other buyer that you're considering. And frankly, I'm not sure the capital was in place when they made that arrangement, but that led them to go out and bring in Bain Capital, who is KAP's capital provider. We recruited a dynamite M&A guy by the name of Dan Girardi, who's on my team. And he actually spent some time with me at Marshberry. Prior to that, he was with Nationwide, led Broad Street for a couple of years.
Super great guy. No two ways around that. Very,
fantastic.
Very talented. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Carey. But the cool thing about his story is he was at Broad Street for a couple of years, and when Keystone and Bain essentially recruited him to build what we have today, he was in a good place with Broad Street, right? Like obviously a very mature $1 billion PE-backed broker platform. But he told those guys, like, listen, if your plan is to build the next Hub or the next just national PE-backed buyer, no offense to Hub, right? They're great people. But just use that as an example. There's lots of nationally recognized PE-backed buyers out there that are similar, right? He said, I'm not interested, but if you'll give me the creative liberty to execute my vision and what I think could be something different and unique to bring to the market, I'm in. So they essentially created Keystone Agency Partners out of that collaboration between Keystone and Bain.
So let's talk about this, Jared, for just a minute, because that's a lot. And honestly, the average person does not understand first right of refusal. They don't understand why networks can or cannot execute on that. They don't know what their options are. Like, there's a lot of unknowns in the world we live in, which is why I wanted to do this podcast at all, because I think even if you did know a little bit about M&A and you've dipped your toe in the water, let's say 5, 10, 15 years ago, the players have changed, the options have changed, and the entire marketplace has changed. So while I don't want to go like super deep into all of that, let's just first start with, how is the marketplace today, which I would describe as one of the healthiest marketplaces we've been in?
It's frothy.
Right. It's absolutely frothy. Like,
Yeah.
so I guess I would say 2022 was probably the healthiest marketplace we had ever been in, but we are now facing a hard market. We're facing rising interest rates. We're facing all these things. And there's lots of different opinions out there of what we can all expect. Those the agency owners that are thinking about transition, if we had a crystal ball, what do you think is on the horizon with our marketplace, with all of your expertise with Marshberry and all of this? Tell me what your read is on the industry today.
Yeah. Well, obviously I don't have a crystal ball. And quite frankly, I'm not sure you should trust my opinion on this topic anyway, because I have been of the opinion that at some point, what's happening in our space is eventually going to plateau, right?
Well, you would be wrong at this point, just so you know. Yeah, of course.
I mean, certainly if I could rewind the clock back, certainly wouldn't make those predictions, and maybe would have invested in some different startups, right?
Well, honestly, many people thought that, like, no one would imagine that this marketplace would have gone from where it was to where it is today. No one would have predicted that.
Yeah,
so while I'm joking with you that you were wrong, we were all wrong, actually.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway.
So just kind of going back, so I started in the industry in 2009, right?
Yep.
So, and it's no secret that the influx and rise and demand of private equity entering insurance is really what is driving a lot of this activity. If you go back to, and Marshberry and lots of other entities study this from year to year, right? How many transactions happen every single year?
Sure.
And what the source of those deals are. If you look back to 2005, 6, 7, there were only 1 or 2 private equity backed M&A deals in those years. And then the Great Recession hit, and then we saw some spikes because of some changes in capital gains tax around 2012. And then from then on, we saw a steady increase in not only the number of M&A deals, but the value of the deals that were happening specifically for insurance agency owners. And so, I've had this conversation with lots of agency owners over the years, and I would tell them, like, listen, your agency value has just about doubled over the last 10 years just because private equity is in our space.
Yep.
And private equity is in a lot of other industries as well, but their insurance is of particular interest to them because of the recurring revenue and just the stability of the business, right? So over the course of the last, call it 5 to 6 years, I think a lot of my previous colleagues and certainly many experts in the industry thought that there's got to be some slowdown, right? Almost every single year, M&A was breaking records. There were more deals. The deal value was just getting bigger. And so that's what I mean, right? In terms of, kind of predicting, like, this has got to slow down at some point. And then obviously last year we hit another, broke through the ceiling again. Now, in terms of, what's going to happen this year, I mean, I can tell you, obviously, from our perspective, we have some insight from what other buyers are doing just based on what we've heard and other reports. But, year-end 22 wasn't quite as intense as year-end 21. Going into 23, I don't think many of the buyers' pipelines are as rich as they were going into last year, first quarter. And my assumption, and again, just from what I'm seeing, we're still going to see, I think, a decent activity level here in the first quarter. But I'm not sure what the rest of the year is going to bring. I can tell you from our perspective, we started from zero in 2020. And at the end of 21, we were 100 million, and at the end of last year, we were almost 200 million. And by mid-year this year, we'll be 230 million. Again, but I don't know. We've got probably 40 or 50 million of revenue in our pipeline today, but I don't know where the last half of our deals are going to come from. And frankly, other buyers are also kind of, we've seen some buyers pulling back on some of the capital that they're deploying.
Sure.
Because of what you just said, right? The economic conditions are getting strained, interest rates are rising, and capital is just harder to come by.
And so here's my take. Listen, we all have our own perspective. I can tell you that my pipeline is as strong as it's ever been. There are lots of people that want to understand the value of their agency. They want to be prepared. Here's what I tell people when they ask me that question. I have not yet seen that there are not still far more buyers than there are sellers. So the demand remains high. I think who the buyers are will change based on their position going into this year and going into interest rates rising. So your options may not be as plentiful, but we were probably somewhere around 20 buyers to every seller at one point. That's pretty fair. I don't think anyone actually knows, but there's a fair amount of buyers in the marketplace. I still think it's probably 15 to 12 buyers for every seller is interested. If you actually put it out there and was aware of who all the buyers are, right?
Yeah.
So, and nothing's changed about independent insurance agents. Here's the thing.
Right.
They're super predictable. They're predictable because of the retention rates are so crazy high. They're super profitable. And if you're running a good agency, you are in demand. There's no two ways around that. So in my mind,
100%.
In my mind, there's things that are changing, but those haven't changed. The moment retention is challenged and maybe not as tight, then we might talk about something changing in our marketplace. But right now, nothing fundamentally has changed other than interest. The cost of money is higher. So, and to me, that's super exciting. That's exciting for anyone who's looking to transition. So,
of course.
So let me ask you, what do you think? And I don't want to talk about KAP specifically. I just want to talk about, you gave a little bit of history lesson on how many private equity deals had occurred in the beginning to where we are now. But what I believe is everyone kind of lumps in their mind, PE backed is just one entity. It's one thing to think about. You tell me what you think one of the biggest myths are in the private equity buyers in the marketplace. Can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think so. I obviously we're talking about, well, maybe just from the industry in general, but certainly from the perspective of the insurance agency owner. I think one of the biggest myths is I can just sell my agency and walk away. Right. And there's a lot of agency owners out there who are looking for an exit, or eventually will need to exit. Right. Perpetuation and transitioning their business is arguably the most important thing that they do is in terms of a single transaction, but it's also one of the biggest challenges that our industry is facing as well, because of how our industry is just aging. Right. And so I think there's a lot of insurance agency owners out there who just think they can just wait until they're ready to retire, and then they should think about selling. I mean, my advice to them would be perpetuation is not an event. It's a process.
100%. Yes.
Dude, it could be a 10 to 15 to 20 year process.
It can be.
And I know, I'm sure, you and I meet a lot of these folks, and, they sometimes tend to kick the can down the road a little bit too long. I would encourage those folks really to kind of educate themselves and just understand their options. And so, as you're talking about, you in your question, you asked specifically about PE backed brokers. I think, my answer was kind of generally related to the whole market. But, specifically to PE backed brokers, I think there's an enormous variance in the types of buyers out there, even when you narrow it down to PE-backed buyers, right? And so KAP is one of, there's probably 20 to 30 well-capitalized
Right.
PE-backed buyers out there, and there's more kind of popping up every year. They all do things a little bit differently. And, we're certainly unique in how we do our business and kind of create and structure our model. And there's every, we used to say that it's like Baskin Robbins, right? There's a flavor for every direction that you want to go.
But I don't think our people in our marketplace understand that. They hear
Right.
PE and they think what it was 10 years ago. They hear a structure that's pretty rigid. And I think what you're trying to say is there is a structure that meets everyone, and whether or not they're PE backed or not, does not mean that their structure looks and feels like the other ones that are also PE backed. So,
Right.
I hope that people take away from this that there are many options out there. There's many options when you sell to other agency owners. There's many options when you do internal even, but there's definitely some serious options with PE backed for sure.
Yeah, there absolutely are. Just to kind of expand on what you just mentioned there, I think, 10 years ago, agency owners thought, like you said, there were only three options, right? Like I could either just stay independent, I could transition internally and sell to my family or the next generation on my team, or I could sell externally, right? And that sell externally, a lot of those options looked very much the same, but today that's not the case. And that's good, I think. I think that's really good for our space, and obviously, the folks that you work with.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, I do not know a lot about M&A. Obviously, not obviously. Why would that be obvious? But I don't know a lot about M&A. I'm still learning, which was honestly the reason that I decided to join this podcast as a co-host, and I've been looking for conversations and opportunities to be around this space. And I think not knowing a lot about M&A is also the case for a lot of different people in our industry. Just like you said, people think that they can sell their agency like, all right, I'm ready to sell. Let me put it on the market like a house. Like, I don't think that's how you do it. So what do you think? Like, are there other things that you think people often misunderstand about M&A?
Well, I think there's a lot that I think people misunderstand about M&A. The thing that I mentioned about, just being able to sell and walk away. Obviously, I mentioned there being lots of choices in the marketplace. I think there's potentially a misconception that, so Carey knows this very well. Most of the population we're talking about, independent agency owners, they're business owners, right? They're independent. They've kind of, they've never had a boss. Some of them started the agency from scratch 20 or 30 years ago, and now they're thinking about what the future holds for themselves. I think there's a huge misconception that if they sell, it's like waving the white flag and giving up. I don't think that that's quite as prevalent today, but several years ago, insurance, I think, was the last industry where it was frowned upon when you sold your business. I mean, isn't that like what entrepreneurship is all about, Carey? I mean, right?
I know it's crazy, but it's part of who they are. So therefore it was this personal thing, and it was almost like defeat if they walked away. And, honestly, Jared, I would say even to this day, there's people that are so connected to their business and their people and their customers and their community because they're an independent insurance agency owner. It's tough to envision letting go of their agency. It's a personal decision, and it's very, very, it's becomes part of who they are. So I would agree with you 100%. Is not failure. It's actually, everyone is going to leave this industry one way or the other, whether they plan for it or not. And you should plan, and you should celebrate the fact that you built something so incredibly valuable. I wish that people viewed that differently.
Yeah. Well, let's not skip over the emotion
I
that,
know. I
right?
know.
I mean, it's so for my entire career in insurance, Lindsay, I have been forced to try to be objective in this whole conversation. It's easy for me because I don't own the business, right?
Right.
Like I've never owned a business. And so, I can't necessarily empathize with the seat that they're sitting in. It is their name's on the door, right? Their family works in the agency. They maybe hired everybody that's come through the door, right? They have a real passion and they've got blood, sweat, and tears and effort invested in building that business. And so it's super emotional. Just to add on to what you
Sure
said,
is.
Carey. But where I was going with that thought was they've never had a boss. They've never reported to anybody, and their name has always been on the door, right? So I think one of the things that I think would help maybe just your audience to have clarified is M&A doesn't necessarily mean that you have to enter into a dysfunctional boss employee relationship with your new partner. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change your name on day two, or even change the way you do business, right?
Right.
So kind of what we were talking about before. There's buyers out there that will do a deal and just leave you alone, right? They'll write you a big check, leave you alone, say keep doing what you're doing, and obviously as part of that new organization, all of the profit rolls to their bottom line. Obviously after you have an earnout of sorts. But there's that extreme all the way to everything changes on day two, right? And
Yeah.
and it just depends on what you're looking for and where the right fit is. But that would be kind of a couple of things that come to mind, Lindsay. I think that would help, specifically about M&A. But there's so many other things we could dive into too, and we haven't even talked about technology or IT or operations.
So, Jared,
There's
I think for sure you're going to be a repeat guest because we could talk about a million things.
that's
But
right.
here's I want to tell you a quick story about what you just said. So I was having dinner with really good friends, agency owner, and they were sharing with me that they are someone who acquires, and the names don't change, the operation doesn't change, the locations don't change, like it stays the same. And so someone caught wind that one of their locations sold, and so it was one of their customers that came and said, I want to change my insurance, I can't believe that you are selling to XYZ. And they're like, oh, that sale actually took place 3.5 years ago, right? It's like, what are you afraid is going to change? So to that point,
Yeah.
there's lots of things that happen that nobody has any idea, and the people remain the same. The carriers remain the same. The behavior remains the same. They might have changed some things internally, but it did not hit that customer facing thing. And it's the perception of change sometimes that I think we're worried about, not the actual change, if you will. So
yeah.
Well,
I think there's a fear. Sorry.
No.
I think there's a fear too on the part of the owner or the seller, right? In that, as soon as they sell their agency or join this larger organization, once and again, I don't want to get too technical with this, but obviously there's when an M&A deal happens, right? There's usually a payment that happens at closing. Then over the course of say 2 or 3 years, they get to earn more sale proceeds. After that, call it a 3-year earnout. I think the seller thinks like, man, I'm afraid, like, am I just going to get fired, right? Am I still going to be relevant to the business? And I've had a handful of these conversations lately with smaller agencies that really are just afraid that they might not be relevant to the future of the business. But that couldn't be farther from the truth, because as a buyer, if we're buying a business or we're buying an agency or we're investing in their business, that's probably a better way to phrase it. They are the most crucial asset. Them, the people, the talent, because they have all the relationships. And so in our model, we want those owners and the leadership team to stay on as long as they are having fun, continuing to help us build that business. So that might be another thing to add to that list, Lindsay. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so many transitionings and changes happening in the industry. I mean, people are terrified of change, I think sometimes, but change can be such a good thing that, we're using new technology, we're updating our procedures and the way we do things. But I think at the same time, it's really scary. So what advice would you be giving to young producers or CSRs or key employees in an agency to deal with these changes that are happening and, continue on with their journey in the insurance industry?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, we all need to be doing our part to bring as many young people into this industry as we can. I know that that's been that really has been a common theme over the last few years. Is like every industry, but particularly insurance, we have an aging issue, right? Where our teams and our owners are getting older, but we need that young generation to step in and kind of, take the torch from them. So as far as advice, I mean, I think the best thing that I could say to, let's just say, a young insurance professional, whether it's a producer or somebody in a service role, I might be talking more to folks that might be in a position to, maybe assume some leadership in the future, right? The most important thing, I think, in a industry where change is constant, is you have to be nimble, and you have to have the ability to adapt quickly to what's changing around you. And we talked about growth a few minutes ago, Carey. Like, that is, particularly if you're a producer, and even if you're on the service side of the business, I think there's something to be said for constantly trying to find ways to grow, whether that's to find a new account or grow your book of business if you're on the production side, or even if you're on the service side of the business, right? If you're on the service side of the business and you're managing clients or interacting with insureds, and there's relationships that you're in charge of kind of maintaining, it's not that difficult to, look for ways to expand those relationships, right? So I would say always be looking for ways to grow not only the agency, but this is kind of just a personal passion of mine. I'm really kind of hyper focused on growth and development. And that's, for me, that's been something that I've kind of adopted a little bit later in life as an adult, not necessarily when I was in school, but it's that's something that I think anybody can benefit from, trying to figure out how they can grow and improve over time. Is if you're focusing on that, everything else will fall into place. And I think, particularly with insurance, this is kind of a business mantra, but, growth really does fix a lot of problems, right? Like, it's not going to fix the culture, but it does fix a lot of problems.
Well, the reality is our marketplace is changing. And if you're staying the same while everything changes around you, it's really difficult to stay up, and it's really difficult to compete. And it just makes it difficult in general. So I would agree with you. I think growth solves a lot of things, but I think that's for a reason, because if you are evolving as a person, as a business leader, as an organization, you are meeting the needs of your customers in a way that others may or may not be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Jared, I so appreciate that you came and shared your viewpoint, because we share a ton of the same viewpoints. I think, we both come from a place where we want to help agents find their path forward, whatever that is. We know that it's different for different agency owners. And I love chatting with you. There's never a time that I don't learn whenever you and I get together and we're able to have these kinds of conversations. I certainly hope that our paths cross in our travels throughout the year. But before we go, though, will you take a moment and tell our listeners, if they want to reach out to you and learn more from you, learn about KAP, how would they get a hold of you?
I'd be happy to share my contact information here.
Yeah.
So my email is jroy@keystoneagencypartners.com.
Yep.
Just all spelled out. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. I really enjoy kind of seeing what you're doing, especially with the podcast and the new business venture.
Thank you.
So I'm on LinkedIn at just Jared D. Roy. But should be pretty easy to find there. But yeah, I think I've always been, kind of an open book in terms of I don't know that there's any insurance related conversation that that doesn't result in somebody learning something. And so I agree with you 100%. And so if anybody has any questions about KAP, or certainly, we're growing, right? It'll be 20 platform partners in a couple of months.
Wow, that's amazing.
There's a good chance that a lot of your listeners may know some of those platform partners. But yeah, happy to chat with anybody about any topic related to insurance. Bonus points if it's about M&A, because that's, I'm pretty passionate about doing acquisitions now.
You and me both, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Well,
right.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining Lindsay and I. We appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Happy to do it. And thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.